filled the newspapers. Body number 13 was Johnny Mowry, 19 years old, a former Marine. His mother, Dolores Nieder, last saw Johnny on September 15, 1977.
We would go out searching for him. We were playing detectives. We were searching for Johnny, looking for him. And already, Johnny was dead.
Dolores Nieder went to the police and reported her son missing. They were not helpful.
He said, no, he said, Johnny's a runaway. Oh, I was shocked when I heard that. I said, what has Johnny got to run away from?
It was the same with all the others. Not a single parent was believed. And for years, some police officers unwittingly played right into Gacy's hands.
And what he said to us, nothing wrong with Johnny, Johnny is not dead.
What made
He's
you...
missing. That's all what he say. He's run away. And I know right away it's not true. Because Johnny no got no reason to run away. If they listen to us, they save so many lives.
While the police claimed they were runaways, Gacy said they were all homosexual predators.
The biggest excuse that he came up with is that all of the victims made him do what he did. It was the victim's fault. If they hadn't pursued him, he wouldn't have had to do to them what he did.
But as investigators discovered the identities of the boys, it was clear that the majority were neither runaways nor male prostitutes.
Gacy had said they were gay. Johnny, I know, was not gay. But even if he was, no one has a right to take anyone's lives.
As more bodies were identified, the names kept coming. William Carroll, Robert Gilroy, Russell Nelson. They were all young, healthy, strong. How had Gacy managed to overpower the boys? The answer, Gacy was cunning, and he had a perfect ploy. In his black car, equipped with 2 spotlights, Gacy pretended to be a policeman. He would stop a boy walking down the street, flash a badge, and tell him to get in. Once inside the car, the boys were driven to Gacy's home. All he needed then was a good trick. He told officers how it worked with his last victim, Rob Peast.
He says, now, it's a very simple trick. He says, I'll show you how to do it. Put the handcuffs on. So he had Rob Peast actually put the handcuffs on himself and cuff himself behind his back. And Rob struggled with the handcuffs for several minutes and said, well, what's the trick here? And John reached into his breast pocket and pulled out the key to the handcuffs and said, the trick is you have to have the key.
With the boys restrained in the handcuffs, Gacy then moved on to his rope trick. Slipping a rope over the victim's neck and twisting a rod through it over and over until the young man collapsed. For the parents who heard the stories of their children's last moments, the image was horrifying.
I could never forgive Gacy for the rest of my life. How on earth can you forgive someone who takes a loving child from you and who does it in such, a tragic way?
Over a period of 6 years, John Gacy murdered at least 33 boys and was never discovered until finally the police listened to the parents of one child.
Believe me, if Rob Peast had been anyone but Rob Peast, if he had been a person that had run away on several occasions, we probably wouldn't have looked into it as closely as we had.
In the spring, 4 months after he disappeared, Rob Peast, the boy who stopped John Gacy, was buried. 9 other boys killed by Gacy were never identified and were buried in separate cemeteries around Chicago. And although the young victims have all now been properly laid to rest, the pain for the families is still very much alive.
Losing a child is just the hardest thing in life that you have to go through.
Gacy pleads insanity, but will the jury believe it? When we continue on Crime Stories. As John Gacy spoke from prison in 1992, he made it very clear that he was tired of being associated with other famous serial killers, especially the man who killed and then consumed his victims, Jeffrey Dahmer.
I'll tell you this, that's a good example as to why insanity doesn't belong in the courtroom. Because if Jeffrey Dahmer doesn't meet the requirements for insanity, then I'd hate like hell to run into the guy that does.
It is an ironic statement, coming from a man who 13 years before had pled not guilty to 33 murders, using the defense of insanity. On February 6, 1980, the first day of John Gacy's trial, people lined up at the criminal court building in Chicago, eager to get a glimpse of one of the most notorious serial killers of all time. Already, Gacy's story had received so much press coverage in Chicago that jurors had to be selected from Rockford, a city 50 miles north. The 16 men and women were bused to the courthouse and sequestered for the entire 6-week-long trial. Gacy was pleading not guilty by reason of insanity. And at first, it seemed the defense had an advantage. The judge was Louis Garippo.
If you really think about it, if the defense is insanity, and you have someone who's killed 33 people, everyone say, hey, there must be something wrong with that person. And I believe that in most, more than half of the jurors that were selected felt that there was something mentally wrong with John Gacy.
In their opening statements, attorneys for the prosecution argued that Gacy was evil. They displayed photographs of his victims on a board, nicknamed the Gallery of Grief. They promised to show that the murders of the young men were thoughtful, rational, and premeditated. The defense described Gacy as impulsive, deranged, a profoundly sick man who collected bodies like souvenirs. The question the jury had to decide, was Gacy crazy or evil? For the defense, a battery of experts testified that Gacy fit the standard of insanity. One was forensic psychiatrist Helen Morrison.
He could commit an act, but it didn't mean that he sat and planned the act. It was almost as if he were an automaton doing this behavior, and once the behavior was done, he was finished.
The psychiatric experts offered varying opinions of Gacy's mental illness: borderline personality, paranoid schizophrenia, amnesia. But the prosecution believed the facts of the case were more important than the psychiatric testimony. If the murders were not premeditated, they asked, why would Gacy have burial trenches dug in advance? Why did he keep handcuffs and a rope ready? If he didn't understand the criminality of his behavior, why would he deliberately choose victims who might not be missed? If he had amnesia, how could he draw a precise sketch locating each body? William Kunkel was the chief prosecutor.
Clearly, when you have this kind of intentional behavior, the pre-planning for all those things, the covering up, the post-planning, the post-conduct for all those things, and all this going on in the backdrop of what on the surface appears to be a perfectly normal existence, just doesn't fit.
As the jury heard the testimony and looked at Gacy, they saw a man at ease and very much in control of himself.
The theory or the thought or the fantasy about someone who's insane is that they're running down the street screaming, pulling their hair out without clothes on. And they could clearly see that he was not insane. I mean, he was sitting in the courtroom, he was participating, smiling, being considerate of where people were sitting.
The jury also learned that Gacy ran a successful business, was involved in politics, and was active in his community. All rare accomplishments for someone truly mentally ill.
A real medical model psychiatrist that really treats patients and understands mental illness will never believe that you can turn this kind of serious mental illness off like a faucet. Did he have personality disorders?